Anyway, so I always do the clap, and I don't know why that's become Pavlovian now. I'm gonna keep that in. Like we're just doing the clap. All right. Okay. So, Katy, welcome to Cinema, Life, and Everything. I almost said my old podcast, and it's not slouching towards masculinity. That's done. But so, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. Thanks very much. I went out this morning wearing shorts, which seemed to be a bit brave. It's now gone completely overcast, so the shorts have now changed up to jeans now. So we're not gonna go the shorts route anymore.
Good
But
stuff.
yeah. So just before we start and we announce your film choices, would you like to just tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Katy. I grew up in Preston, and I've kind of, as an adult, been between London, Preston, and Paris, for a little bit. And an actor. Started off as an actor, then got sidetracked into corporate sales for 4 years, which was the most disgusting 4 years of my entire life. And then I ran away from that to work at Disneyland Paris.
Amazing.
And then I came back to acting, and most recently I've really kind of focused, because I love health and fitness, and I started to go towards actiony stuff, and I had someone's just suggested you could probably double for children. So then that was it, never looked back, started training for stunts, and here I am.
Amazing. It's so interesting, but the more people I talk to, especially in this line of work, they always have the health and fitness link connection
Yeah,
as well. And I guess because you've got to be physically fit to do the work, but also having that interest in body and having that discipline, it sort of seems to like play into this sort of stunt work. Wouldn't you agree?
absolutely. And I think as well, like, I've always been more of a physical performer anyway, in terms of acting. Like, I've done physical theatre, and that's kind of been like widely informed in my education and background. So I think that's really helped me, because I'm very bodily aware and I'm very comfortable in my body, that's just been a natural path for me. And it's really been lovely kind of exploring that path and seeing where it's taken me, which is where I am today. So yeah, definitely.
No, I've also got to ask as well, would you, because sorry, we will get onto films, I promise, but it's just you
Yeah,
said two really interesting things really, really quickly on. As an actor, when you create the emotion, there's, I've read it in self-help books and stuff as well, but the way your posture and the way you physically communicate sort of informs and brings the emotion as well. Have you ever found that connection as well there as well? I find that incredibly interesting to hear from your perspective of it.
yeah. I mean, it's really weird, because I don't put a lot of, it sounds really lazy, but I don't put too much thought into performance that much. I try and
Mm.
it happen, but yeah, the body definitely gives you cues of how you're going to communicate and how you're going to bring across that performance. Is really important. And it's definitely coming, like, now I mostly focus on screen work. um Definitely coming from being really physical,
Mm.
bringing it into just the eyes has been my biggest challenge in the whole wide world with acting, because I'm so expressive anyway. And yeah, it's just bonkers, but it helps you, because if you do need to bring it up and out, and you can, yeah, you can definitely make yourself all versatile, I think.
I completely agree. And the thing is, coming from a professional wrestling background where everything is so big and he's hurt me.
Yeah,
And then you realize that if you do that in a close up, you look insane. Like you think,
yeah,
oh, I'm just being expressive. This is how my head moves. But you do it in a close up. It's like, oh my God, what's going on there?
yeah. And you sometimes realize as well, like, I thought I was just such a big expressive person, like, day to day, and I kind of am, when I get really excited about stuff. So yeah, it's very weird, because they say acting is just being, but if you're a very physical being, it's actually like, no, you got to rein yourself in. So yeah, totally get that. It's wrestling massively. Yeah.
Completely. And it's even like some of the bigger like actors that are known, like even like someone like Nicolas Cage. I always thought in my mind's eye, Nicolas Cage is chewing up the scenery, running around, like waving his head all over the place. But when you actually watch one of his performances, okay, the way he may use his voice may be quite expressive and quite all over the shop, but he's actually very, very still in the face. But you don't realize till you actually start to sort of critique it.
Yeah, I wonder if he's because, you know, he's done quite a lot of action stuff as well. Like, if he's had to go for a similar journey of in it in, but then like the voice is where it comes out, potentially. So yeah.
That's yeah, maybe the first few takes are insane, and then you just sort of like rein it in.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. No, thanks for that, Kate. So anyway, we could talk about a whole podcast of that, but it is cinema life and everything. So let's have, what are your 3 films, please?
Well, my 3 films are what I thought of on the day, because I changed my mind.
It's impossible.
Much. I do have the ones I always go to. So my first is Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. And I would choose the entire trilogy, but I was strict. I was like, it's a film.
That's amazing.
And yeah, Fellowship, because it's the number 1. It's the one I always start, and it's I'll go into that later. Number 2, I actually can't remember what was my number 2. Was it Silence of the Lambs?
We've got Silence of the Lambs, yeah.
Yeah, because no, sorry.
Because
yeah, epic film. And then third, I'm going to put in a wild card, because people who know me just know I've got a little bit of crazy inside me. So I put Legally Blonde. Amazing. Because it is such a feminist film, and I think people don't think of it like that. But I'm going to go into that later.
Brilliant.
I did also have in mind the most recent John Wick 4, but I was like, probably not many people have seen it. And I wanted to give a shout out to Everything Everywhere All at Once. Oh, Chef's Kiss.
Yeah, incredible.
Amazing. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Amazing.
And Thor Ragnarok. And I've probably got, and Seven as well. That's such a good, like, there's so many.
Yeah. I can always bring you in for a second podcast. But this is it. I understand doing this. When I ask people, 3 favorite films, go. Especially if you're involved in film as well. It's like, you know, it's almost an impossible choice.
It's the sort of thing where you're like, I just have to pick what I'm feeling on the day, because I will be there forever and I'll be changing it. And I wanted to message you about 5 times, going, I'm going to change it. Just stick with what you've said.
That happens a lot, but I will say as well, I have to thank you, because in giving me those 3 choices, you got me to watch Legally Blonde again, which I loved anyway. But I was like, wow, this is so good. Like, just
so outside your comfort zone as well.
No, it is. I loved it, but weirdly I got it mashed up in my head with Miss Congeniality. So I was expecting like Michael Caine and stuff to rock up, and I'm like, no, it's a different.
You know what? That's another one. That's such a great film.
Yeah.
I think Chandler in Friends goes on about, but she's an FBI agent undercover beauty queen. Like, what's not to love? But yeah, okay.
Right. So should we start off with then Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring? Absolutely epic. Like, all 3 of these films are epics in their own way, but for like making an epic choice, this is just absolutely incredible. So why does it inspire? A big old question here. Why does it inspire you? What does it do for you? What are the standout parts of it? And, you know, just an explanation to why you picked it.
So Lord of the Rings has the biggest place in my heart in film, as I'm sure it does with so many people of our generation ish. So I'm 34. I know I look 24. I'm 34. So when it came out, I was like, it was 2001, wasn't it? So I was like 12 when these films came out, 12, 13, 14. And they're the reason I'm in this industry. They're the reason I'm an actor. They're the reason I used to come home from school and listen to the soundtrack or watch the extended edition extras on DVD. And I used to watch them religiously in the cast commentaries. And I just saw through these films how much camaraderie and hard work as well. Like, these guys were putting in especially like the Hobbits, with having to get up a ridiculous time for their feet to be put on. And then they'd rap and they'd just have like the best time outside. And I saw that and was like, that's it. That's what I want. Yeah, it also as well, I think a lot of people with, you know, the journey of Frodo in the Ring, it's got a lot of, obviously Tolkien took a lot of inspiration from his experience in World War One. I think it was World War. Yeah, it's World War.
Yeah,
World War One. Yeah. So sorry, there's a pigeon on my window. Get off. Oh, listen to me. Okay, I'm
The pigeon
anyway,
took direction.
yeah, there's with that, there's a lot of, I think, a lot of people who are neurodiverse or have mental health issues, like I have done for many years, really resonates. And yeah, it's beautiful in that kind of, it's such a comfort to anyone who's experienced something with mental illness or neurodiversity. So it's like a huge big comfort blanket of a film in one, really. And I think I chose Fellowship because there's so much of the Shire in the Fellowship.
Yes.
And I feel like the Shire is kind of what heaven looks like a little bit. Like it's just people, like good people enjoying the most simple things in life. And yeah, that's enough probably of why I've chosen it. Yeah.
And I was going to ask as well, you talk, and I agree with your stuff, what you say about it being an escapist film and a help to neurodivergent and people who have suffered with mental health. Would you say that it's more about the themes that it explores? Like, because I always got a lot of the depression side of it and the blackness sweeping the land and it being combated against, but also would you say it's in part of the escapist or the escapism that the film promotes, or the themes it deals with in the subtext, or a little bit of both for you?
Absolutely both. I think to talk about the escapist part, definitely, like immersing yourself in another world, like it's so important, I actually think. And if there's lots of people who perhaps in their childhood didn't get fully chance to do that, so as adults it's really important to do and lose yourself in a different world. And there's something quite magical about that. It's wonderful. And then the other part of definitely the themes and similarities with depression, and particularly in, I mean, I'm going to talk about Return of the King, but it's very difficult not to talk about.
They all sort of, they all mesh together.
Yeah. And with Return of the King and seeing particularly the ending and Frodo's decision at the end, and how things, when you've gone through something harrowing like a trauma, and how you completely get why you can't stay in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
I think there's something there that Tolkien goes, because obviously it's the war thing, isn't it? Once you've seen war,
you can't go back.
You can't change your opinion of the world. It's completely different. And I think with a trauma or with depression particularly, is something I deal with, it's something where you feel seen, because you go, that person knows something, and I've experienced something similar. And I think seeing that is really comforting. And I think as well, Sam, the character of Sam, he's the real hero, because we all need a Sam.
Choking me up.
Yeah. Honestly, like, because he comes from, like, talking about the Shire being this really pure place, he is the purest character, and everyone needs a Sam. So yeah, I think it's
it's just
it's
too good. I mean, that's it. Some people's, I've heard some criticism that it's too just good versus evil, but you escape into that world, and like you say, you connect with the child again, and it's just do good, just be good to each other, like just help each other.
And the thing is as well, like, don't get me wrong, I am completely, for example, Game of Thrones. The reason I love that is because it's not good versus evil. It's like everyone's good and evil. Everyone's got, and I truly believe this about everyone in the world, everyone has certain amounts.
Yes.
Them. Even like psychopath killers have at one point given their nan a kiss, or there's something there, even if it's like a tiny glimmer of hope, which again is a big theme in Lord of the Rings. And I think that has its place and it's really important. But also sometimes we do just need, like you, John Wick, sometimes you just need to sit down, watch a load of people fight with guns and knives. Sometimes you need to watch a really basic good over evil win to just feel like you're
100%.
Like all these different pieces of film and pieces of art, they all have their place. So I think the most important thing is when you're looking at film is accepting it for what it is first.
Yes.
Like a Scott Adkins film, I went to a screening of his Accident Man 2.
Yeah, banging.
He's like, I'm not trying to make like, I don't know, the next bloody Marvel film, or is like, does what it says on the tin. We're just having fun. And I think there's something to be said for that. There's a place for all of these films. So see it as it is. The good versus evil is, we need that sometimes.
But you mentioned it early on, and I completely agree with you to your point that it seems like these mid-level, mid-budget films are coming back in. Everything Everywhere All at Once deals with some big themes, but it's that sort of mid-level film, especially considering it was going up against a film that was almost identical in its plot devices with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. They're both dealing with multiverses, but how much, for me anyway, film's subjective, everybody loves it, every different films, but how much more did, you know, Everything Everywhere All at Once resonate, because it just dealt with the story of the mother and her child, and maybe feeling that you were destined for more and you were stuck into this muddling existence.
Yeah, like she was in the universe, the worst version of ourselves. And I think sometimes so much currently we talk about being the best versions of ourselves. Actually, yeah, of course, like, aspiration is great and very important and a strong value of mine. But knowing that you can still be loved being the worst version of yourself is like such a good spin, because we are all driving and striving for perfection, and with social media and everything, and there's so much, like, I think it's really positive. There's a movement of self-development, which is brilliant and wonderful, but just letting yourself be a little mess and someone still loving you is, I think, a really rebellious and powerful act. So yeah.
I think the message that really stuck with me as well, at one point they say to her, she has tried so many things in that version of herself, but failed at all of them. But the simple fact that she tried meant that she was able to live all these different lives. And I was like, oh, that's just the will to try. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
But one thing I did want to ask you about Lord of the Rings before we move on to the next one. There was a decision made by Peter Jackson that's in the books but not in the film, that the Shire gets to stay, because you mentioned about the Shire and I have the same feels about it, that in the, sorry, spoilers here, in the book the Shire gets destroyed a great deal to used for resources. They didn't include that in the film. How did you feel about that?
I think, well, when I first watched the films, I hadn't read the books. And my sister brought home the video and was like, this is really good. She got us all sit down as a family to watch it. Nice. So I didn't know. And then I started reading the books on holiday, probably but I think, yeah, I think it depends what you're, and this is a big thing with me, because it depends what you want the effect to create. And I think with what Peter Jackson wanted to create was just being as true and honest as he could to the books, even though obviously Tom Bombadil as well, another thing that was removed. Trying to honour as much of the story as possible. And I know that that was a huge theme for Tolkien, because at the time the industrialisation after the war meant that so much of the British countryside was suffering, and actually since, like, in the last 50 years, like, it's really got a lot better, which is really important and great. But I think somehow, like, there is enough of that in the trilogy and in the film.
Yes.
You see the Shire as this haven. You see it as something that's to be revered and respected, the beautiful outside, the simple things. And that kind of follows through as well, not just with the Shire, but with Rivendell, Lothlorien, even into less kind of woodlandy rural places like Rohan and Gondor and Minas Tirith. Like, there's still within all those places the natural beauty is very much prominent. So I think that was achieved without because when you look at the destruction of the Shire as well, and particularly in Return of the King and things like that, it can sometimes make people take away from the good versus, like,
yes.
And I think it's really important, like I said before, you sometimes just need a win. You sometimes just need a film where it goes, actually, yeah, this did happen. And you again, it's escapism. Sometimes you just need, like, you don't need to know about all the ins and outs. And I think, you know, maybe perhaps with the new films that are coming out, which is really exciting.
Yes.
Going to explore a bit more of, is it going to be totally good versus evil, or how are they going to change it? How are they going to tell that story? Because again, that's the beautiful thing about film. It's one person, I would not say one person, it's one team's,
Yes.
you know, this huge team's telling of a story, and you can tell stories so many different ways, and that's why it's so beautiful. So
And
I'm such a, I'm probably like the worst critic in the world, because I can always see someone's ideas and respect them for what they are a lot of the time. Even like watching terrible films, I'm like, well, you know, there's a place for that. I'm too
I
so forgiving. I'm just like, well, you know, someone will enjoy that.
And I also think it came from a place of truth. Like I very rarely listen to reviews anymore. If I see something and I'm like, I'll probably like that, I'll give it a go. Even if it just intrigues me in some way, I'll give it a watch. But I know how hard it is to produce a piece of art. So for someone just to slate it, I'm like you say, it might not be right for me, but someone else might watch it and say it's their favourite film. So who am I to go, oh, it was awful? You know, like I might not agree with it, but someone else might. So that's right for them.
Point art, just because you don't understand it or engage with it, someone else will. So every piece of art has its place, and
Exactly.
I think that's such an important thing to talk about when you're criticizing or discussing film as a piece of art, because they all are, even like
Yeah.
big commercial ones that we think are kind of trashy, like they have their place. It's great. Something
Exactly.
for everyone, you know.
Completely agree. And the other thing, you know, we talk about the industrialization. There's this little clip where you see the orcs being born, and you see all of this natural beauty being all churned up for this monstrous thing to be given birth to out of the earth, in almost like, you know, in sort of like a perversion of what nature should be. And I
Yeah.
thought they sort of summed it up really well there in like this 20-second clip. I was like, that sort of makes sense to me. That's what like Tolkien was trying to get across.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're telling a story, it's what are the most important parts, what are the themes, how can we bring those across in a way that's succinct enough, but, you know, staying true to the message of the books. So
Exactly.
I think Peter Jackson did it beautifully. I mean, it swept the Oscars with Return of the King, so
Yeah.
it kind of speaks for itself. Even though, you know, that is a load of people's decision on it, like, you know, it's good to, yeah.
I think it's nice. I mean, like you say, it's all subjective, but it is nice when a film that is such a fan favorite film that wins over so many hearts, that's popular, also wins the recognition of awards. I know it's not a competition, but it's just nice. It's like you totally like like you say, the amount of effort put into it, the length of time, the quality of the acting, the beauty of the special effects, everything came together perfectly. So yeah, I'm glad.
It's about being seen again.
Yeah.
And I think as a nerd, it's like the nerds are being seen. Yes.
One for the good guys.
Yeah. And it's lovely to have that, because, you know, it feels a bit of a win for an underdog.
Well, earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned about that even psychopathic killers can have something to love about them, which is my terrible segue into the quite stunning and again a massive Oscar award winning Silence of the Lambs, which it's a trick. Please go ahead.
Well, interesting to kind of follow on from that point is Anthony Hopkins does such a brilliant job at Hannibal Lecter that it's very difficult to feel any empathy for him. I mean, we don't obviously see any evidence, but he's there like drawing and listening to classical music, and he's very cultured and engaged with art. But Silence of the Lambs was the first 18 I think I'd watched. I was a bit the kid, so
that's a hell of a one to start off with as well.
it was in, so I was really lucky that I was in a generation where at A level I could do things like film studies. Nice. And I loved film studies, and again that was because of the Lord of the Rings that I wanted to do it. Excuse me. And yeah, with Silence of the Lambs, like, we were all 17 because it's for educational purposes. We were allowed to watch it, and I was like, I didn't want to be there like, this is my first 18, but it was my first 18 I'd watched. And you know, what a, like you say, like, what a brilliant first one to watch. I think the reason it's there for me is it's always been a favorite. I can't watch it too often because I love it so much. It's one of those that you don't want to like wear it out. sort of
Get
thing,
that a lot. Yeah.
which probably comes from the generation of having a VHS, like you out video. But I think as well, like, it introduced me to the, very much like Lord of the Rings, the art making of film, like the process, the techniques. Like, as I was watching it, we were told about techniques like question and answer shots, like all sorts of stuff. Mise en scène, like the way that in some of the shots, and this happens in Seven as well, when there's like a barrier between Clarice and Hannibal, and you can see there's a physical barrier between them, but when they come into the extra close shot, or super close up of both of them, that barrier is gone. And it happens in Seven as well at the very end, when what's he called,
John Doe,
Kevin Spacey,
John Doe,
John Doe, Kevin Spacey.
You never know his name.
Again, that happens, and it's when the characters penetrate through the other person mentally again. And it's things like that I was like, that was my first sort of like, oh, like film is like, I could see it as an art form, but then I was like, oh, it kind of, or like, and now what's lovely is from that education that Science Olymps kind of started off, and Lord of the Rings, I can now sit and watch films, and a lot of the time me and my partner will just go, wow, look at that shot, or that transition, and just go, that's so clever. So it's added as well an extra level of enjoyment to film for me, because you recognize more of the art behind it and the intention. I guess it's like, you know, understanding like a certain brush stroke a bit more, and how like I'm not big into like art as into kind of paintings and that sort of stuff, but yeah, like it's just that extra level that you get, that kind of, oh yeah, that's really good, I can appreciate that, which is lovely, it's beautiful.
I think as well, you can sort of understand the choices being made and why they're being made at those times. So it's not only do you get, like, you get the enjoyment, you get the physical reaction of just being a viewer and watching it, but then you can sort of go back and go, oh, that's why that makes me feel like that, because of the techniques used and the composition used.
Absolutely, yeah, it really does, and yeah, the other thing with Science Slam is obviously like Anthony Hopkins' portrayal of Hannibal is just brilliant. Like, I don't think there's like another performance like it. It's his interpretation of this serial killer, just amazing. Like, and I think there was something, I don't know if it was a rumor, but his part of the reason that his marriage broke down was because his wife couldn't unsee Hannibal and him. And I'm like, bloody hell, like that's a bit too much of a good job. But yeah, like that just to me. And again, when you're talking about being such a big physical performer, and what he achieves with stillness, is another level. Like, it's, and I think that's part of it, because as humans we are expressive and we have facial expressions and stuff, but his eyes in that film are like the same, no matter what. So it makes him so hard to read, which I think as a performance is why it's so good, because he's gone, what's really human about people, expression, laughter, like face lines, like all these wonderful beautiful things about us, and how does someone who is a psychopath, who doesn't feel emotion, like how do you take that away? And it's kind of, it's not a deadness behind the eyes, it's just a removal of everything. And how he does it, like, I think perhaps someone who's not an actor is just like, well, sure, that's easy, you just don't move your eyes. And I'm like, mate, have you ever tried not to move your eyes?
Or bring anything of yourself into the moment. He's completely being someone else. Well, not according to his wife, but but I just think, that sense of him standing stock still, it's almost like an animal, it's something very shark-like in it, an animal waiting to pounce. But when we have conversation, when we watch art, there's always that sense of recognition, the sense of being seen, the sense of having that connection. And like you say, in his performance, apart from arguably the bit when Clarice reveals about the Silence of the Lambs, there's never any recognition. Like you say, it's completely just void, just a void of movement, a void of presence. You could almost pass by him, but the fact now, but that's sort of his power as well, that he looks just so motionless. He can do these deadly evil things, and you don't realize till it's too late.
Yeah, and it's the whole story of it. And I've read the book as well. The book actually explores more of Clarice, and there's like a whole best friend character that gets removed, which is and the book's really good. So if you enjoy the film, read the book. It's bloody good. And I've gone on a tangent. What I was gonna say.
The removal of the best friend character, the void of emotion, the recognition of emotion.
The thing about it is this, the whole story is the kind of cat and mouse of, you sort of think like, oh, is she gonna crack him? Like, does he actually like her?
Yes.
Like, what is this? Like, why is he still accepting for her to come back? Because there's this whole thing of like, no one gets through Lecter. Like, he's just gonna destroy you, gonna run out crying. And like, Clarice pretty much gets laughed at because a woman in the FBI, particularly around that time, was such like, she's, you know, paving the way, man. Like, so for her to go in, and it's just such a good kind of like, oh, is she managing to she does, like, I don't think she does, but
no,
kind of, it makes it, that's what makes it really exciting, because you're like, he's this not deadpan, but he's like this complete psychopath, like not letting anything. But there's bits where you're like, is he? And that's the really creepy thing about it. And that's the almost addictive thing, because you're like, is she gonna crack him? Like, what's going on?
That's the thing, because there's glimmers of emotion there. It's not like he's just deadpan and straight faced and just, he's not doing anything. He's doing so much, but he's choosing not to do anything, and that's the real. But yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I did want to ask you about that at the end. Do you think that he did care for her? Because I think the other books explain a little bit more later on, like Hannibal maybe gives you a more definitive answer, but the stroke of the finger in the film, and at the very end when he calls her to almost brag about he's having a friend for dinner, I'm like, does he see her as a like mind? Does he feel seen by her, or is he just like, she's going to be another victim in time?
Yeah,
It depends how nihilist you are, really, I guess.
If it was like a real person in the world, I'd really love to think that there is a soft side, because it is one of my beliefs. Like, I believe there is a soft side. Like, the fact that he appreciates art, you know, art is about human emotion, connection, that sort of thing. So it's very weird how like he really involved in this art, classical music, and then just can't with people. So the me who's like has that belief there's good in everyone, but like in the film I'm just like, nah, he's kind of used to. But then I think that's the thing, it ends with the question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I love films that end with a question, because you go away going, what? Oh, and it gives you something to discuss. And that's what good art does. It makes you question things, it makes you discuss and talk about it. Like, if you come out of the cinema going, oh well, yeah,
that was
nice, like, I don't know if it's done its job as art. And like I said before, everything has a place. You don't have to come out of the cinema going, but you should come out this. I think if it's a good enough film, if you've enjoyed it, you come out discussing that film.
Yeah.
No matter if you're just like, oh, that bit was so funny when blah 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 blah, or oh, that bit was really good, oh, I was in tears at this bit. Like, that's the point. So yeah, it's a different kind of diegetic response. Diegetic? No, visceral response.
Two good words, though.
Yeah. That's my film studies knowledge coming.
And you got mise en scène in there as well. I'm impressed.
You know, shout out to my old film teacher. He would just be there like, yes, girl. Like, this knowledge is nearly 20 years old.
But I completely agree. There's no higher or lower. I mean, the film that's popped into my head for some reason is something like Universal Soldier. You can use that as like, oh, it's a critique on the horrors of war, how people have had their brainwashed by violence. Or you could say, I just want to watch Jean-Claude Van Damme do spin kicks for an hour and a half. Whatever it fulfills in that moment, then the art's true to you. But I agree with you as well. When you have seen a film that resonates, this is why you've picked these 3 films, and they keep you asking questions. Your mind keeps picking at it for days afterwards, and you think, I have to see that again, or I have to talk to someone about this. They're the masterpieces, and they don't have to be the ones that win loads of awards. They're just the masterpieces for you.
Yeah, and that's the thing about humans really as well. Like, we're all allowed to be different, and everyone's allowed their place. And you know, I'm not a believer in right or wrong. Like, I am. That sounds really bad.
No, I get what you mean. Yeah.
Most things in life aren't right or wrong. They're just different.
Yeah.
That's what makes us so interesting. That's what makes films and characters interesting, because it's the differences. If we all the same, it'd be bloody boring.
Before we move on as well, and
Yeah.
she does get overlooked a lot, and there's no, it's just because Anthony Hopkins, and it is all about Hannibal Lecter, but Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs is absolutely phenomenal. Like the character,
Amazing.
yeah.
You know, like I say, she's I think if you come from like a background where you've maybe been, you basically are a minority, you have a heavy weight on your shoulders when you're telling the story of someone in that position. And so much justice, because you know, a lot of the time women are criticized for being like, she doesn't do the thing of like, oh, you're too emotional as a woman. She doesn't try and be too masculine, which is quite a nice segue into Legally Blonde as well. But it's really good.
We're smashing them today. I'm loving it.
Yeah. Oh, it's like I chose them for a reason. And yeah, it's that sort of thing of like, she's just her. She's not trying to be like, I'm a woman in this profession, I'm gonna she just is. And that's what's really important for me, because I really don't like it when it's kind of made a thing like, oh, you're the first woman in space, or you're the woman to do this, or you know, like, I don't really like it when people are like, how do you feel like as a woman as in the acting industry? I'm like, do you know what I mean? It then becomes a thing, and I don't like that. Like, I think it's important to acknowledge like there are struggles and stuff, but we're just people as well.
Yeah.
We're just people enjoying the experience as well. So that's what I like about it. It's just like, it's just in there doing a job, doing it amazingly. And the fact as well, I think in the climax of the film, when she's at Buffalo Bill's going through, you see that.
Right, there we go. So there was an epic point being made there about Jodie Foster's acting, and letting identification be the obstacle.
Yes, exactly. And you see in the climactic scene at the end when she's at Buffalo Bill's house and she goes after him, and it's like you do see the fear, but she's not like, and especially at the time, like still in the, like, this film was made in 1990, came out in 91. You know, there was such the archetype of, if a woman's scared, she's irrational and is like, oh, come and save me, and she scared, and you see that, which is really good and interesting for her character. But she still holds it together.
She does.
And I think that's also like a really, you know, boss move as a woman, because we needed at that time to see women like that, and we still do, you know, and that's why it's really important to have diversity, inclusivity. But yeah,
I think it's not wrong to show vulnerability, but if you just make it that's the only thing, like if you're always identifying with, like I say, the problems that people face, not that that's wrong, then it doesn't have to be the thing that always objectifies, if that sort of makes sense. It's sort of more, you can show a powerful, strong archetype without having to go, but you know, so I completely agree. So there was an amazing segue going earlier on talking about women and feminism, so let's into Legally Blonde.
I mean, she's only a trainee in that as well.
Yes.
Oh, rightly. So the whole thing about Clarice Starling, she doesn't change who she is. She's not hyper feminine, which I think Legally Blonde is, but she doesn't change who she is, and she stays true to who she is, and that's the feminist crux about Legally Blonde. Is it does start off in a little bit, she's chasing after this guy, so for people who haven't seen Legally Blonde,
It's
go
banging.
watch it.
Yeah, really.
What
I
did you think?
remembered it was incredible. I remember I always liked Reese Witherspoon. I always remember that Reese Witherspoon's projects when she was just an actor, but then when she's become a producer, she's very, very good at choosing roles and projects that get the subtext in there, get the questions, like you say, getting those questions asked about people's places in society and how they're viewed. Like I say, weirdly got stuck in my head with Miss Congeniality, but then when I watched it again, I was like, this is incredible. It's funny, but most importantly, it's smart, it's pertinent. It, like, all three films you've chosen are completely timeless. All right, outfits may change, certain types of language may change, but the points they're making are timeless, and that's what and it's very funny, more than it, just really funny. Yeah, like,
it's great, and you know, it takes the archetype of blonde, like that's the whole point of, you know, this blonde girl from Bel Air, and she's got, like, she's the homecoming queen, she's, you know, got everything, and her partner breaks up with her because basically she's too blonde. Like, he's like, I want a serious girl, I'm going to law school now, so I need someone who's serious, and she's like, but I'm serious about you. And it's really sad because you just think, actually, like, she brings the humanity to that role, which I think a lot of the time, if you look at the time it came out and a lot of previous films and subsequent films, that archetype of, like in Mean Girls, it's very difficult for a lot of women to empathize with, because she does have everything. She's a high school sweetheart, she's got this amazing boyfriend, she lives with rich parents who are still together in Bel Air, and she's got everything going for her. But maybe it's the question of blonde, is she also intelligent? And she is. And she stays true to herself throughout the film. She doesn't, when she goes to Harvard Law, she doesn't dye her hair brown, or she doesn't try and fit in. She does it her way, and she stays true to who she is, which I think is actually a really, really powerful message for women.
yeah.
Because there's a writer called Glennon Doyle, and she wrote about how one of the most biggest things, like biggest compliment a woman can receive, is being selfless. So if you have to actually get to the point of losing yourself, losing who you are as a person, to then be, like, recognized as good and amazing, then what's the point? And lose herself, she stays 100% true to who she is, and that's such a good message for, you know, when that film came out, probably similar age, probably about 12, 13, like young adolescent. And that's such an important message, like, stay true to who you are. It doesn't matter what you might be in, a completely different, you know, she's a fish out of water in Harvard, she comes in on the first day with a little fluffy pen, she doesn't have a laptop, she's there taking notes, and she doesn't realize there was reading, and she's learning as well. And there's such a, you know, they are hard on her, and they do think she's a joke, but she's like, well, no, I'm here to win my boyfriend back, and I'm gonna get a law degree. And then, you know, the change of it is, actually, she finds out she's a shrewd lawyer, like, she's good at what she does. And the whole trial as well about with Brooke Wyndham, I think her name is.
Yeah, sorry, that's the one. Yeah.
She has an alibi, and it's one of my favorite things. She's like, did you get her alibi? She's like, oh yeah, it's really good. And they're like, what is it? She's like, well, I can't tell you, because she gives her word and she's true to her word. So you start seeing these things about this archetype that actually, like, there's a lot about sisterhood and being there for women. And, you know, the whole thing of, they think that Brooke Wyndham's character has just married this guy because he's old and rich, and actually she's like, no. There's some other things as well that we enjoy as women, like not shying away from. Actually, it's totally fine for women to enjoy sexual pleasure in a man who's well endowed, you know, like,
Yeah.
that's really, you know, important as well. So yeah, that's why I love it so much. And again, it's one of those sorts of films, like, if you've had a bad day, you just come home and switch off and watch something that's funny and relaxing, and but still has such a true and heartfelt kind of message.
I think that's what's beautiful about it as well. And I think that's why comedy works so well sometimes, because you're laughing along and it's only after the fact you realise, oh, it's actually asked me some really interesting questions of myself as well. But something you got from it, which I found so important as well, the idea of uniquity, and going back into what you said about working in corporate and then going into something that was a lot more creative. It's, why would you want to be in a relationship or in an environment that tries to strip you of your uniquity? So you just become like everyone else. It's surely to get an environment to change around you, to be accepted for who you are, and then that adds another color to the palette of life. Ooh, that was a bit hippie, but you know, wanting that desire to be seen and be who you are and stay true to who you are as well, is that something you agree with?
Absolutely. That's the thing about, like I was talking about, diversity, inclusion, like everyone wants to be seen in the world. One of the most important things, to be seen and to be loved, are two, and to be seen isn't something we talk too much about as like a need, but it's really important. And I think it's good for, you know, the world to see different versions of what women can be, when there are these archetypes and stereotypes that are played into. Yeah, it's yeah.
I think the other thing I just wanted to mention about the film as well was that she, and I don't know if you agree with this, like you say, she didn't have to become just, oh, she has to beat the men at her own game or just become a man. It's being unapologetic of who you are as well, you know, like they make the fish out of water jokes, which you normally get in these sort of films, but then, like you say, they make the very pertinent point of, but this is who she is, and she actually discovers that she doesn't need to change who she is for the great thing now, like change who she is for the sake of a relationship. There is an, you know, this, I am who I am, and this is who you should be loving, and I should be able to love myself like this as well, and people should be able to accept me like this as well. I don't have to change for you. We all have our place in the world.
And that's the point of the film, that she starts off trying to change herself for a man, and then she discovers that she finds herself through that process, and that's really quite beautiful, actually. Like, it's saying that, like, you might start off like trying to people please, essentially, and trying to be this perfect woman for this person who doesn't even like respect you, and then she goes and finds the respect and love for herself and finds something she's really kick-ass at. And there is yeah, like, probably I didn't realize, but yeah, me in the corporate world, like, the amount of, I had a couple of female bosses. I had my first female boss, amazing, wonderful woman. And the amount of times I got criticized for what I was wearing. And you're just like, I'm on a phone. People can't see me. Could be wearing a clown costume. And it's that sort of thing of, maybe that's why now it still has such a strong place in my heart, because I was changing who I was to fit into those places. And now I've found a world where, and a career path where I'm just me and I'm authentic. And that's also so important for people. Just be who they are, accepted, and you don't have to do the same stuff to get on board. Like, me and my partner were talking about polyamory yesterday, and just saying, personally, I don't understand it, I don't get it, but if that's your cup of tea, you go and fill that up, baby. Like, you go and do it, because if you're shaming,
you go get your PG tips.
PG tips. I'm here with my Yorkshire tea, and we're both married. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like, just letting people be who they are. Like, you don't have to agree with everyone or live, but it's like, we all have our place. And I think, yeah. And there's also Legally Blonde too.
Yes.
Also really good. It's got Sally Field in. So, and that kind of furthers the idea even more, because that follows her story in the corporate world, her as a lawyer, and she follows like an animal rights bill. She tries to bring forward this animal rights bill. So if you haven't seen that, that's also another just fun one. But
and this is the importance of art as well. So, like, this is obviously a recorded conversation, but people going to see a piece of popular entertainment, and then you get to have a conversation about something that maybe you wouldn't normally discuss, or it makes you suddenly have a curiosity or a question about something you normally wouldn't, like viewing your world through a different lens. And I think that's so important as well, the fact that we can have these sort of conversations and just you know, freely without any ill intent or want to upset anyone, just to go, actually, I'm curious about this. Could you explain this more? Or maybe I need to go and do a bit more research. I never thought about it that way. And that's what's so important about art as well, giving you that ability and that want to question.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think particularly as humans, and the comfort zone is the enemy of anxiety. No, it is the enemy of anxiety and development. And so many people now are very happy with staying in their comfort zone. They don't want to try anything new because it's scary. And one thing I've learned, the reason why training as a stunt person has done wonders for my mental health is because I'm in that stretch zone. I'm not in the panic zone. You know, you've got comfort zone, stretch zone, panic zone.
Yeah.
Just in that stretch zone. And that's what sometimes watching these different films do. It's not, you know, sometimes it's really good to sit down and go, well, I wouldn't normally watch this, but I'm going to watch it and see what that opens up in me. And I think as actors, it's really important to do that, because a lot of the time, you know, when you submitted stuff, you might have a thing where you have a casting type, and you get kind of pigeonholed into those sorts of things. Sometimes it's not, and sometimes you have a character and you've got to, you know, think outside the box a bit, and kind of you bring yourself to the role, but then there's also all the stuff that isn't you, and how do you create realism in that? So I think it's really good to kind of get out of that comfort zone, go and see other stuff. And it's like, at the end of the day, if you don't like it, it's no big deal. Like, you'll learn something. Like, anytime you've learned something, you've generally probably not had a good time.
Yeah. That's a really pertinent point. Yeah, I really agree.
Uncomfortable experiences make you learn something. You don't do much of your learning in that comfort zone. I would hazard a guess that maybe 2% of your learning is comfort zone based. Everything else is when you're tearing out your hair, or you're crying into a pillow. You're like, why is this happening to me? And then you go, oh, what did I learn from that? Oh yeah, like now I can move forward. So yeah, go and do stuff outside your comfort zone. It's the best thing. You just better as a human for doing it.
I always remember you've said this, and it always reminds me of a David Bowie quote that I've always got stuck in my head as well. He goes, when you're trying something, he goes, when you're exploring something, he goes, you're not in the deep end, but he goes, your feet just can't touch the bottom and you're just on the surface of the water. He goes, then you're in a good place creatively. And I was like, yeah, that really makes sense. You're just on the right side of uncomfort.
Absolutely. Wow, that's I'm stealing that as so succinct. Like, exactly that. It's just that point where you can just take one step backwards and be in the comfort zone and be safe again. You can also be in danger of taking a too big step far forward and being in that panic zone. So
it's just exploring those deep waters
and looking at yourself, and
exactly.
like, yeah.
Well, Katy, an amazing conversation. 3 incredible films that everyone should go and check out. And we actually touched on a few other ones as well. Probably go.
Like, I could sit here all day and talk about so many films. But yeah. What?
Sorry, go on.
I was going to ask you a question. Like,
oh no.
Maybe 2. Like, what was your favorite out of the 3, and do you have like a favorite film? If it's just at the moment, that's cool, but like, yeah, I asked you 2.
Okay, well, no, that's okay. So my favorite out of the 3, the most joy I got from watching again was actually Legally Blonde, because I've watched Silence of the Lambs quite a lot, and look, I'm the same as you actually. Fellowship of the Ring, actually all 3 of them, I've got the box set of the DVDs and the extended editions, and I watch them constantly anyway, because them next to Star Wars, the original 3 of Star Wars for me, I lose myself in them. They're absolutely incredible. But I love Reese Witherspoon anyway, from my ex-partner. She really got me into watching more of her stuff. And then watching that again, I was like, this is, because I went to see that in the cinema. Again, I think it just interested me. I like the idea of it. I like the trailer. And I was like, yeah, amazing. Even better than I remembered it. So thank you.
Nice, good.
No, thank you very much. But I was just going to ask thank you so much for the conversation. Oh, actually, 3 favorite films. This is tricky for me, but probably off the top of my head, Fight Club, The Fountain, and what would the other? Terminator 2 Judgment Day, but the extended edition.
Yes, honestly, the toughest reload of a shotgun you've ever seen.
And the bit when he goes, now I know why you cry, although it's something I can never do, and hugs John. And I'm like, anyone says anything bad about Arnold Schwarzenegger, watch that bit there.
Yeah.
Watch that bit.
Oh, good films, man. Good.
We'll talk about them another time. But
Yeah.
yeah, please, thank you so much for this. It was awesome. Where can people follow you if you want them to follow you? If not, don't worry about it, but I'll stick it in the show notes.
I am mostly on Instagram as @Katy_Treble. It's Katy with a Y, not an IE. So like Katy Perry, not like Katy Price.
Brilliant. Good little. That's a t-shirt right there.
Katy at Katy Treble on it, Katy_Treble on Instagram. That's kind of it. I'm not on Twitter. I am on Facebook, but I don't do anything on it. So if you want to see what I do, that's probably the best place. I do have a website. It's katytreble.com. It's very much for all my performance stuff. So yeah, it's also got my measurements on there. If you want to know how big my arms are or how knock yourself out. I'm like, yeah, and then it's got a gallery of some of my work and credits. So if you're interested, have a look. It'd be nice to have some visitors.
Yeah, I'm like, my website's like
I've recently updated it, so that's why I'm plugging it. But yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much once again. Like I say, I'm sure there's another free films there as well. It doesn't stop at free, so maybe in the future at some point I could get you in for another chat about another free as well.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kay. Well, have a lovely, enjoy the rest of the day. I'm glad you didn't get attacked by a pigeon. And
yeah, me too.
And I'll see you again soon, all right?
Good luck, pigeon. Yeah, take care.
Take care. Bye now.